tell you exactly why he's still the governor of South Carolina. He has no shame. Absolutely no shame. Conservative Mark Sanford is back in the news tonight. The big news is he won't step down. He's going to stay on as governor. At least that's what he's saying. Now, this is a man who violated the public trust. He basically cheated on the people of South Carolina, saying he was going to do the job, and he didn't. He, take the family issues and put them off to the side. That's a totally different chapter. The issue here is a public servant who basically wants it both ways. Listen to what Sanford said today.
Initially, my reaction was to resign. To be human is to, on occasion, fall flat on your face. I've done it in the most public of circles. The question now is, what do I learn from it, and what do others learn from it?
To be clear, you are going to remain as governor. Your intent is to remain as governor. Yes, sir.
The idea that he's going to pay back the $8 grand for the trip, cut me some slack. Now, that does not answer his dereliction of duty, and his actions clearly illustrate he abdicated his responsibility as governor. Folks, taking a trip out of the country for days is not a moment of infidelity and an action of being irresponsible. It's a commitment to act in a fraudulent manner while taking a paycheck from the state. The guy is still on the payroll. Now, why don't you go try that in the private sector? And, of course, the Republicans, they love to talk about the private sector. Why don't you try that? Be unaccounted for a week. Go lie about it. Just take off with some company funds without authorization and see what happens. You'd get fired. I'm sure, now, if he hadn't have gotten caught and he was really going to pay the money back, right? I think that this guy is a sleazy politician who is now hiding behind his plastic Jesus. We're all supposed to be on bended knee with him because he screwed around with the taxpayer dollars. I have no mercy for this guy until he resigns. And so far, there has been no public restitution. Now, we were told back in the Clinton years that, character counts. We got to have character in every office. Now, if the conservatives of South Carolina are going to allow this guy to continue to serve after lying to them, after misusing their time, he was on the payroll. Yeah, he could pay the trip back, but he was on the payroll. And what if something serious had happened? Why can't the people of South Carolina step up and just do what they got to do and get rid of this guy? So should the governor resign? For more, I am joined by GOP strategist Ron Christie, former special assistant to President George W. Bush and CEO of Christie Strategies. All right, Ron, tell me, why is it that the conservatives are allowing this to go on and not holding this man accountable? What do you think?
Well, Ed, I know you're standing up there in New York City, but perhaps you ought to sit down, because I pretty much agree with you. I think it is a disgrace for a politician, be they Republican or Democrat, to betray the public trust. This is a man who left the country for 5 days. He's the chief executive of the state. He's in charge of the Army National Guard. I think it's a disgrace. I think more people, my mother is a constituent. She lives in South Carolina, and she is beside herself as to why this man remains in office.
Well, I, agree with you, obviously, and I also think that it shows a great deal of character from the standpoint that politically, wouldn't this be an opportunity for the Republicans to send a message trying to rebuild the party that they just don't put up with this kind of honky-tonk?
I actually tend to agree with you, Ed. I think the Republican Party, this is obviously one bad actor who betrayed the oath that he made to his wife and obviously to his children, but it's inexcusable as being the top elected official in the state of South Carolina, the governor. Republicans should say, we stand for morality, we stand for what's right and wrong. This was clearly wrong. Obviously, the private matter, he can deal with his wife and his family, but for betraying the public trust and the good of the party, for the good of the state, he needs to go.
All right, now this is Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. He made an interesting comment about how he thinks that he could stay on and continue to move forward. Here he is.
I think if Mark can reconcile with Jenny, and that's not going to be easy, that he can finish his last 18 months. He's had a good reform agenda, and I do believe that if he can reconcile with his family and if he's willing to try, that the people of South Carolina would be willing to give him a second chance. But he's also got to reconcile with the legislature. If he can get his family back together, I think he can continue out his term and maybe do some good things next year.
Ron, do you take some issue with the senator from South Carolina?
I hate to say it, Ed, I kind of do. I mean, I've been very consistent about this. I thought that Governor Spitzer, when we found out what he had done, I thought he should go. I think Governor Sanford has a lot of reproachment to do with the people of South Carolina, and I don't know how he can rebuild the trust that he's violated. Obviously, we all believe in forgiveness. We all believe in the power of redemption. I'm just so troubled by the stories that went out. He was on the Appalachian Trail, then he was here, then he was there, and then we find he was in Argentina. I just can't stand for that, Ed. I'm just tired of it.
Do you think that he will survive this? Do you think that they will mount the charge to get him out?
I don't. I think there's a lot of concern that the lieutenant governor is a little bit inexperienced at this point, and given that he has 18 months left in his term, they figure, well, that'll give the Democrats an advantage going into an open election. But again, for the good of the party, for the good of his family, for the good of the integrity of the Republican Party, I think Governor Mark Sanford should resign. Okay. Great to have you with us tonight, Ron. Appreciate your time. Joining me now is South Carolina State Representative Todd Rutherford. Mr. Rutherford, the latest development this afternoon, as I understand that your lieutenant governor down in South Carolina has said that if you get rid of Mark Sanford, I'll serve until the end of the term and then I won't run for re-election. Would that work for you?
That would work, but he didn't call me and say that, and somebody else called him and he said that he was running that idea through his head, but he had not committed to it. So if he has by now, then I think that's a good thing. But either way, going back to the initial point, here's a governor that was gone for 5 days and never once bothered to call his office and check in. At what point do we say this is just ridiculous? It has nothing to do with the affair. It has only to do with if he were a regular state employee in South Carolina, if you check the guidelines, he would have been fired. He is the chief executive of the state, 4.5 million people that he left in the lurch, and not once did he bother to call and say, hey, is everything okay? Not once.
Is this a dead issue in South Carolina as far as forcing the governor to resign, or is this something that's going to linger on and affect the way this state is run? What do you think?
I think listening to Senator Graham's comments, what troubled me is the fact that in South Carolina and just about anywhere else, unless there's an election, there's no way to tell what the people are feeling. So the governor is basically just being selfish and staying on because he chooses to. He's not saying, well, the people of South Carolina are asking me to stay or they want me to stay. He's saying that all these politicians that are surrounding me that are being greedy and enjoying my position as governor and what I can give them, they're the ones that are asking me to stay. If he went out and held public forums and overwhelmingly people said stay in office, then I would agree with him. But he hadn't done that. In fact, he's remained relatively sheltered ever since this occurred.
You know, Mr. Rutherford, this is what I'm not hearing, or maybe I missed the soundbite. I don't hear Governor Sanford coming out saying, this will not happen again. You can count on it that I'm not going to be vacating this position for days on end, and this will never happen again. Has he said that? I mean, I haven't heard that anywhere. It's almost, you know, it's just, well,
he did not.
That just amazes me. After all of this, he's not going to guarantee the people that, hey, don't worry, this will never happen again. I slipped up. I've got my act together now. You can count on me, South Carolinians. I'm not hearing that. Are you?
No, I'm not. And he's not even saying, don't fire me. I've got it together. I'm going to call in. I'm going to tell the lieutenant governor where I'm going. He's not saying any of that. Most of the talk that I hear in South Carolina is most people like myself forgive him for the affair. That's not the issue. We pray for his family. We pray for his kids. But we are concerned about the fact that he was basically in AWOL. He was in dereliction of his duties to the people in South Carolina, and nobody seems to care. I mean, where are all these Republican voices that were calling for Bill Clinton to resign? Where are all these Republican voices, this moral majority, these Bible thumpers that have been using their Bibles to beat people over the head? Where are they when it comes to Mark Sanford and his dereliction of duty to the people of South Carolina? Had a hurricane come while he was gone, no one could have reversed the highways in this state but the governor of South Carolina. He potentially put lives in jeopardy, and he doesn't care about it.
Well, what you said about how people are letting this slide, you know, if it slides in conservative South Carolina, doesn't it lower the bar for public officials across the country? I mean, if this guy can overcome this in South Carolina, anybody can overcome anything anywhere.
You know, the problem is, and I don't mind lowering the bar just a little bit, because he's one of the people that raised the bar. He kept talking about the expectations on public officials and the expectations on elected officials. And I think that elected officials are person or people just like he was. He was not perfect. He showed that in his actions, but that's not my issue, and I know that's not yours as well. What we're talking about is taxpayer money being used to give somebody a job, in this case the governor, who abused that privilege, who went AWOL for 5 days, never bothered to call in, whose staff lied about where he was, and who comes back and he says, I'm not going to do it again, but hey, forgive me for what I did, and I'm going to stay in as governor because you all can't remove me.
Will you keep up the drumbeat to get rid of him?
Absolutely. I'm going to do whatever I can. I don't think that it rises to the level of impeachment, but yes, I'm going to do whatever I can.
All right. State Representative Todd Rutherford with us tonight here on The Ed Show. Thanks so much for joining us.